The great hall of the Imperial War Academy fell silent as Fleet Commander Keel walked slowly toward the speaking platform. His footsteps echoed against the polished stone floor, and every young officer in the room watched him with wide eyes. They had heard stories about this legendary commander. They had studied his battles in their training, but seeing him in person was something else entirely. Keel was old. His carapace, once bright blue, had faded to a dull gray. Deep scars crossed his face and arms, marks left by weapons and explosions from wars fought long before these young officers were born. His left eye was covered by a patch of dark metal, a replacement for one lost in battle decades ago. But his remaining eye was sharp and clear, and it swept across the room with the cold focus of a predator. The young officers sat in perfect rows, their uniforms crisp and their postures straight. They were the best of their generation, selected from thousands of candidates across the empire. They believed they were ready for anything. They believed they understood war. Keel knew they understood nothing. He reached the platform and stood in silence for a long moment. The anticipation in the room grew thick enough to taste. Finally, he spoke, and his voice was rough like gravel scraping against stone. "You think you know war," he said. "You have read the tactical manuals. You have run the simulations. You have memorized the histories of our great victories. You believe the Empire stands supreme in this galaxy, and you are eager to prove yourselves worthy of that legacy." He paused and let his eye move from face to face. Some of the young officers nodded with confidence. Others tried to look humble but failed to hide their pride. "I am here to tell you that everything you believe is wrong," Keel continued. "Everything you think you know about warfare will be challenged by one species, a species that joined the galactic community only 2 centuries ago, a species that is physically weaker than us, technologically inferior to us, and vastly outnumbered by us." He paused again, and this time there was confusion in the room. Whispers passed between the young officers. Keel could see some of them smiling, thinking he was setting up some kind of lesson about overconfidence. "I am talking about humans," he said. The whispers turned to quiet laughter. One young officer near the front actually snorted with amusement. Keel fixed his eye on that officer and held the gaze until the laughter died. "You find this funny," Keel said. "Of course you do. You have seen the reports. Humans are small, barely reaching the chest of an average. Their bodies are soft and fragile with no natural armor, no claws, no venom. They require constant food and water and rest. Their ships are crude compared to ours. Their weapons are primitive. By every measure we use to judge a species, they should be easy prey." He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to something just above a whisper. "And yet I have faced humans in battle 3 times in my career. 3 times I have led our finest warriors against these fragile creatures. And I tell you now, before all of you, that each of those encounters haunts me still. I close my eye at night and I see their faces. I hear their voices. I remember the things they did and I feel fear." The room was completely silent now. No one was laughing anymore. "You do not believe me," Keel said. "I can see it in your eyes. You think I have grown old and soft. You think perhaps my mind has weakened with age. So let me tell you a story. Let me take you back 40 cycles to a time when I was young and foolish just like you. Let me tell you about the first time I faced humans in battle." He turned and walked to the edge of the platform, his hands clasped behind his back. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was distant now, lost in memory. "It was during the Frontier Expansion War. The Empire was growing, pushing outward into unclaimed space. We encountered many species during that time and we conquered them all. Some surrendered immediately. Others fought briefly before accepting their defeat. We had never met an enemy we could not crush. Then we found the humans. They had established a small outpost on a barren moon at the edge of a system we intended to claim. A mining operation, nothing more. Our scouts reported fewer than 300 humans living there, mostly workers and engineers with a small security force. We sent a fleet of 30 warships and 3,000 ground troops. It should have taken one day to secure the outpost and claim the system. I was a junior commander then, leading my first battalion. I was eager to prove myself. I wanted glory and honor. I wanted to show my superiors that I was worthy of greater command. When we arrived at the moon and demanded surrender, I expected the humans to comply immediately. What could 300 soft creatures do against 3,000 warriors? Commander Laura was the human leader at that outpost. She was a small woman even by human standards. Her hair was gray and her face was lined with age. When she appeared on our communication screens, she looked tired and worn. I remember thinking she would surely see reason. I remember thinking this would be easy. She listened to our demands for surrender. She asked how we would treat her people if they gave up peacefully. Our fleet admiral told her the truth, that the workers would be taken as laborers and the security forces would be executed as a warning to other human colonies. He expected this to frighten her into submission. Instead, she laughed. It was a small laugh, quiet and bitter. Then she looked directly at the screen and said words that I have never forgotten. She said, "Come and take us then. But I promise you this. For every one of my people you harm, I will take 10 of yours. And when you finally break through our walls, you will find nothing but ashes and ghosts." Then she cut the transmission. Our admiral was furious at this disrespect. He ordered an immediate ground assault. I led my battalion into the tunnels beneath the moon's surface, expecting to crush these foolish humans within hours. I was young and confident and certain of victory. I did not know that I was about to enter a nightmare that would last 19 days. Keel turned back to face the young officers. His expression was grim. That is where my first story begins. The siege of Outpost Vega 7, a battle that should have been won in a single day but instead became a lesson in horror. A lesson about what humans are truly capable of when they have nothing left to lose. He gestured for the young officers to settle in. "Listen carefully," he said, "and perhaps you will understand why I fear these creatures more than any enemy I have ever faced." Keel closed his eye for a moment, letting the memories wash over him. When he opened it again, his voice was heavy with the weight of the past. "The tunnels beneath that moon were dark and cold," he began. "The humans had been mining there for years, and they knew every passage, every chamber, every hidden corner. We did not. We had scanners and maps, but the rock contained minerals that confused our equipment. We were blind, and we did not even realize it. On the first day, we advanced with confidence. My battalion pushed through the main entrance, expecting to find frightened humans hiding in corners. Instead, we found traps. The first explosion killed 12 of my soldiers before we even saw a single human face. The blast collapsed the tunnel behind us, cutting us off from reinforcements. We were forced to press forward into the darkness. The humans used the shadows like weapons. They would appear from nowhere, fire a few shots, and vanish before we could respond. Our soldiers fell one by one, picked off by enemies we could barely see. By the end of the first day, I had lost 30 warriors. We had not killed a single human. Our commanders sent more troops. They poured soldiers into those tunnels like water into a drain, and the humans swallowed them all. Keel paused and looked at the young officers. Their earlier confidence had faded. Some of them were leaning forward, caught in the story despite themselves. "Commander Laura was not a trained military leader," he continued. "She was an engineer who had been placed in charge of a mining operation, but she understood something that our admirals did not. She understood that war is not just about numbers and weapons. It is about will. It is about how much pain you are willing to endure and how much you are willing to make your enemy suffer." The humans set traps everywhere. They rigged explosives in the walls. They dug hidden pits in the floors. They poisoned the air in certain passages with chemicals from their mining equipment. They never faced us directly because they knew they would lose in open combat. Instead, they made us chase them through a maze of death. On the fifth day, we found the bodies of 3 soldiers hanging from the ceiling of a large chamber. Their armor had been removed. Their weapons had been taken. And carved into the wall behind them were words written in our own language. It said, "You are not welcome here." Our troops began to fear the darkness. Soldiers who had fought bravely in a dozen campaigns started to hesitate at every corner. They jumped at every sound. The humans were in their heads and they knew it. I remember one night, though there was no true night in those tunnels, only the darkness we carried with us. I was leading a patrol through a narrow passage when I heard something ahead. I signaled for my soldiers to stop. We listened. There was only silence at first. Then I heard it. A human voice, soft and calm, singing a song I did not understand. The words were strange and gentle, like something a parent might sing to a child. But in that darkness, surrounded by death, it was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. We never found the singer. We searched every tunnel in that section and found nothing, but the song stayed with me. It still stays with me. By the 10th day, we had lost over 500 soldiers. The humans had lost perhaps 30. Commander moved her people constantly, never staying in one place long enough for us to surround them. She used the ventilation shafts to travel unseen. She turned our own equipment against us, hacking into our communication systems and sending false orders. Once, an entire battalion attacked another battalion in the darkness because they believed they were fighting humans. Our admirals grew desperate. They ordered us to flood certain sections of the tunnels with toxic gas. They did not care if our own soldiers were still inside. They just wanted to end the nightmare, but had prepared for this. The humans had sealed suits from their mining work, and they survived while our soldiers choked and died. On the 15th day, we finally cornered a group of humans in a small chamber. There were only 12 of them, exhausted and wounded, their ammunition nearly gone. I led the assault myself, breaking through their barricade with 100 soldiers at my back. I expected them to surrender now that they were trapped. They did not surrender. Those 12 humans fought until every single one of them was dead. They used their empty rifles as clubs. They used their bare hands. One of them, a young man with blood covering his face, charged at me with nothing but a piece of broken metal. I killed him, but not before he wounded 2 of my guards. As he died, he looked at me and smiled. He smiled as if death was nothing to fear. That was the moment I began to understand what we were truly fighting. On the 19th day, we finally breached the command center. Our forces had been reduced from 3,000 to less than 1,000. The tunnels behind us were filled with corpses, both and human. We had paid for every step with blood. Commander was waiting for us. She stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by the bodies of her fallen soldiers. Behind her, huddled against the wall, were perhaps 20 civilians, engineers and workers who had never held a weapon, trembling with fear but refusing to abandon their leader. Was barely standing. She had wounds on her arms and chest, and her face was pale from blood loss. In her hand she held a small device, a detonator. I knew immediately what it was. She had rigged the entire section with explosives. One press of that button and we would all die together. I ordered my soldiers to hold their fire. I walked toward her slowly, keeping my hands visible. I thought perhaps I could reason with her. I thought perhaps I could convince her that surrender was the only option. She watched me approach with eyes that held no fear. When I was close enough to see the lines of exhaustion on her face, she spoke. She said, "My people are getting on an evacuation shuttle right now. Your ships are too busy chasing shadows to notice one small craft slipping away. By the time you realize what happened, they will be gone." I told her she would die if she pressed that button. I told her she could still save herself by surrendering. She laughed. It was that same small, bitter laugh I had heard on the communication screen 19 days earlier. She said, "You still do not understand us. I was never going to survive this. I knew that from the beginning. But those people behind me, those civilians you wanted to turn into slaves, they are going to live. And that is worth more than my life. That is worth more than all of your lives." Then she pressed the button. The explosion killed her and 40 of my best soldiers. I survived only because a piece of falling debris knocked me backward through a doorway. I lay in the darkness for hours before rescue teams found me. The evacuation shuttle escaped. The civilians survived. And Commander Laura became a legend among humans, a story they tell their children, a name they speak with pride. Keel fell silent. The young officers stared at him with pale faces and wide eyes. "That was my first lesson about humans," he said quietly. "They do not fight like we do. They do not fear death like we do, and they will sacrifice everything to protect their own. Remember that lesson. It may save your life one day." Keel let the silence stretch for a long moment. The young officers needed time to absorb what they had heard. Some of them looked shaken. Others were trying to hide their unease behind masks of professional calm. None of them were laughing now. "My second encounter with humans came 20 cycles later," Keel continued. "By then, I had risen to the rank of senior commander. I led a strike force of 12 warships, tasked with intercepting enemy convoys in disputed space. The war between our peoples had settled into a long stalemate. We could not conquer them. They could not defeat us. So we fought smaller battles along the borders, each side trying to weaken the other through attrition. Our intelligence reported that a human convoy would be passing through the nebula. The nebula was a vast cloud of gas and dust that made long-range sensors useless. It was the perfect place for an ambush. The convoy was carrying refugees from a colony we had destroyed 3 months earlier, civilians being transported to safety in the human core worlds. The convoy was protected by a single heavy cruiser and 3 frigates. 4 ships against my 12. I thought the humans were fools for attempting such a crossing with so little protection. I thought we would destroy them easily and claim a great victory. Captain Daniel commanded the escort. I did not know his name then. I learned it later after the battle when I studied the reports and tried to understand what had happened. He was a man in his middle years, experienced but not famous, just another human officer doing his duty. We waited in the nebula, our ships hidden among the clouds of gas. When the convoy appeared on our sensors, I gave the order to attack. My 12 warships emerged from the mist like predators closing on wounded prey. I opened a communication channel and demanded immediate surrender. I told them their situation was hopeless. I told them we would show mercy if they powered down their weapons. Captain appeared on my screen. He was sitting in his command chair, calm and steady, as if he were having a normal conversation rather than facing certain death. He looked at me with eyes that held no fear, and he said something I will never forget. He said, "I have 3,000 civilians behind me, families, children, old people who have already lost everything. You want to take them as prisoners. You want to separate parents from their children and work them until they die. That is not going to happen, not while I am still breathing." I told him he was being foolish. I told him his 4 ships could not possibly defeat 12 of ours. I told him surrender was his only chance to survive. He smiled. It was a small smile, almost sad. Then he said, "Who said anything about surviving?" He cut the transmission, and then he did something that no sane commander would ever do. He ordered his ships to attack. Not retreat, not scatter, attack. The human cruiser accelerated directly toward my formation, its weapons firing at full power. The 3 frigates spread out behind it, using the cruiser as a shield while they positioned themselves between the convoy and my warships. I was so shocked by this madness that I hesitated for 3 precious seconds before giving the order to return fire. Those 3 seconds cost me dearly. The cruiser hit my formation like a hammer, aimed his ship directly at the center of our line, forcing my warships to scatter or collide. His weapons targeted our engines and sensors, crippling 2 of my ships before we could organize a response. The frigates swept past us while we were confused, positioning themselves as a barrier between us and the fleeing convoy. I ordered my ships to focus fire on the cruiser. 12 warships poured destruction into that single vessel. Its shields failed within minutes. Its hull was torn open in a dozen places. Fires burned across its surface, and bodies were sucked into the void through the breaches. Any sensible captain would have surrendered or fled. Did neither. He kept his ship fighting. He kept his weapons firing even as his crew died around him, and he kept pushing forward, driving his crippled vessel directly at my flagship. I realized too late what he intended to do. I ordered evasive action, but my ship was not fast enough. The human cruiser struck us at full speed, crashing into our forward section like a fist of metal and fire. The impact killed hundreds of my crew instantly. I was thrown from my command chair and pinned beneath fallen debris. My bridge was filled with smoke and screams. As I lay there, trapped and bleeding, I heard's final transmission. It was not directed at me. It was directed at one of the frigates. He said, "Get those people home. Tell our daughter I love her." Then his ship exploded, taking a massive section of my flagship with it. I later learned that was Lieutenant, his wife. She commanded one of the escort frigates. She had been there on that bridge, listening to her husband die, and she had not hesitated. She had not broken. She had followed his final order and led the convoy to safety, while the rest of my strike force tried to recover from the chaos had created. By the time we were ready to pursue, the convoy was gone. They had escaped into the far side of the nebula and vanished. My strike force had been reduced from 12 ships to 9, with 2 more badly damaged. We had suffered over 1,000 casualties. The humans had lost 1 cruiser and perhaps 300 people. And they had saved 3,000 civilians. Keel paused and looked at the young officers. His voice was quieter now, heavy with something that might have been respect or might have been sorrow. "I have commanded many battles in my life. I have faced enemies who fought with skill and courage, but I have never seen anything like what Daniel did that day. He knew he was going to die. He knew from the moment he gave the order to attack, and he did not hesitate. He did not flinch. He flew his ship into the heart of our fleet and sacrificed himself to save people he had never even met. That is what humans are capable of. That is the madness that lives inside them. They will throw away their own lives without a moment of doubt if they believe the cause is worthy. They will charge into certain death with a smile on their faces. How do you fight an enemy like that? How do you defeat someone who is not afraid to die? How do you break the will of people who consider death an acceptable price for victory? I do not know. After 60 cycles of warfare, I still do not know. Survived that battle. She continued to serve in the human fleet for many years. I am told she eventually became an admiral. I am told she never. And I am told that every year, on the anniversary of that battle, she returns to the nebula and releases a small memorial into the void where her husband died. I have thought about that many times. About a woman returning alone to mourn her husband in the cold darkness of space. About the love that must still burn in her heart after all these years. About the children who grew up without a father because Daniel chose duty over survival. Humans are terrifying because they can hate with such fury, but they are also terrifying because they can love with such depth. And sometimes, I think the love is more dangerous than the hate. Keel fell silent again. The young officers did not move. They barely seemed to breathe. That was my second lesson, he said finally. Humans will sacrifice everything for those they love. Never forget that. Never underestimate what they will do to protect their own. Keel walked slowly across the platform, his footsteps echoing in the silent hall. The young officers watched him with different eyes now. The arrogance had left their faces. In its place was something new, something that looked almost like fear. My third encounter with humans was different from the first two, Keel said. There was no battle, no weapons were fired, no soldiers died, and yet it frightened me more than anything that came before. He stopped walking and turned to face them. 8 cycles ago, a plague swept through Prime. A ripple of unease passed through the young officers. Many of them remembered that time. Some of them had lost family members to the sickness. The plague appeared without warning, Keel continued. It spread faster than anything our medical scientists had ever seen. Within weeks, millions of our people were infected. Within months, hundreds of thousands were dead. Our hospitals were overwhelmed. Our doctors did not know how to stop it. We tried everything we knew and nothing worked. The High Council was desperate. They called emergency meetings every day, searching for solutions that did not exist. They brought in scientists from every corner of the empire. They offered vast rewards to anyone who could find a cure, but the plague continued to spread and our people continued to die. And then someone on the council made a suggestion that seemed impossible. They suggested we ask the humans for help. You must understand how shocking this was. We had been at war with humans for decades. We had killed millions of them. They had killed millions of us. The hatred between our species was deep and bitter. The idea of asking our enemies for medical assistance seemed like madness. But we were dying. Our children were dying. And so the council swallowed their pride and sent a secret message to the human government. They explained the situation. They asked if there was any possibility of assistance. I expected the humans to refuse. I expected them to laugh at our suffering and tell us we deserved this fate for all the pain we had caused them. Part of me believed they would see this as an opportunity to weaken us, to let the plague destroy what their weapons could not. I was wrong. The human response came within hours. They did not demand payment. They did not ask for territory or political concessions. They simply said they would help. 3 days later, a human medical ship arrived at Prime. It carried a team of 40 doctors, scientists, and medical workers led by a woman named Dr. Grace Palmer. I was assigned to observe their activities, to ensure they did not use this opportunity for sabotage or espionage. I met Dr. Palmer when she stepped off her ship. She was a small woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back from her face. She looked exhausted, as if she had not slept in days. Later, I learned that she had been working continuously since receiving our request, preparing her team and gathering supplies. I asked her why she had come. I asked why humans would help enemies who had caused them so much suffering. Her answer was simple. She said, because you are sick, because people are dying, because we are doctors and this is what doctors do. I did not understand. I told her that our two species had been killing each other for generations. I told her that many of her own people had died at hands. I asked how she could set aside all that pain and offer help to those who had hurt her kind. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said something that changed how I understood humans forever. She said, hatred is a choice. Compassion is also a choice. I have lost people to this war, Commander, My brother died fighting your fleet at the Battle of New Vancouver. I could choose to hate you for that. I could let that hatred define me. But what would that accomplish? My brother would still be dead, and more people would suffer because I chose anger over healing. She put her hand on my arm. Her touch was warm and gentle. She said, we cannot change the past. We cannot bring back the dead, but we can choose who we want to be in this moment. And right now, I choose to be a healer. I choose to help people who are suffering, even if those people were once my enemies. The human medical team worked for weeks without rest. They studied the plague. They tested treatments. They shared everything they learned with our scientists, holding nothing back. Dr. Palmer barely slept. She moved from patient to patient, offering comfort and care even when she was too tired to stand. After 23 days, they found a treatment. It was not a perfect cure, but it stopped the plague from spreading and allowed infected patients to recover. Within months, the crisis was over. Millions of lives were saved. When the time came for the human team to leave, I went to say goodbye to Dr. Palmer. I still did not fully understand why she had done what she did. I asked her one final question. I asked if she had ever felt hatred toward us during her time on our world. I asked if she had ever looked at a patient and thought about all the humans we had killed. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Of course I did. I am human, Commander. I feel anger and grief just like anyone else. When I treated your children, I sometimes thought about human children who died because of this war. When I worked to save your elders, I thought about my own grandmother who lost her home when your fleet destroyed her colony." She paused. Her eyes were wet, but she did not cry. She said, "I felt all those things, but I did not let them control me. I looked at your people and I saw suffering. I saw fear. I saw parents holding their children and praying for someone to help them. And in that moment, your people were not my enemies. They were just people, just living beings who needed care." She smiled then, a sad and weary smile. She said, "That is what it means to be human, Commander. We carry our pain with us, but we do not have to let it poison our hearts. We can choose to heal instead of harm. We can choose mercy instead of revenge. It is not easy. Sometimes it is the hardest thing in the world, but it is always possible." Then she walked onto her ship and left. I never saw her again. Keel stood in silence for a long moment. The young officers did not speak. Some of them looked confused, as if they could not understand why this story had frightened their commander. "This is why humans terrify me," Keel said quietly. "It is not just their capacity for violence. It is not just their willingness to sacrifice themselves in battle. It is this ability to hate you with every fiber of their being and still choose to help you. This power to hold their pain and their compassion in the same heart without breaking. They are not logical. They are not predictable. You cannot measure what drives them. You cannot calculate what they will do. One moment they will fight you with terrible fury. The next moment they will save your life and ask nothing in return. How do you defeat an enemy like that? How do you predict what they will do when they themselves do not seem to know? You cannot, and that is the most terrifying thing of all." Keel walked back to the center of the platform and stood very still. The silence in the hall was complete. Every young officer watched him with intense focus, their training manuals and tactical theories forgotten. They had come here expecting a lecture about fleet formations and weapon systems. Instead, they had received something far more valuable. They had received the truth. "I have told you 3 stories," Keel said. 3 encounters with humans that shaped my understanding of warfare. Now let me tell you what these stories mean." He clasped his hands behind his back and lifted his chin. "The Empire has existed for 2,000 cycles. We have conquered dozens of species across the galaxy. We have built the most powerful military force ever known. We believe ourselves to be the ultimate predators, the masters of war, the rightful rulers of the stars. And then we met humans. Humans evolved on a world called Earth. It is a small planet, neither particularly warm nor particularly cold, with a single yellow sun. By galactic standards, it is an unremarkable place. But Earth is what we call its environment is hostile beyond belief. The humans who survived on that world had to fight every single day just to stay alive. They fought the weather. They fought the land. They fought the creatures that wanted to eat them. And most of all, they fought each other. Before humans ever built their first ship and reached for the stars, they had already been at war for. Generation after generation, century after century, they killed each other in numbers that stagger the mind. They developed weapons of terrible power. They created strategies of breathtaking cruelty. They turned warfare into an art form, perfecting every aspect of violence until it became as natural to them as breathing. This is what we faced when we tried to conquer them. Not a peaceful species that had never known conflict, not soft creatures who would bow before superior strength. We faced a people who had been forged in the fires of endless war, a people who understood combat in their very bones. But that is only half of what makes humans dangerous. Keel paused and let his eyes sweep across the room. The other half is what Dr. Palmer showed me on Prime. Humans do not just carry violence inside them. They also carry an extraordinary capacity for compassion, for kindness, for love. They can hold both of these things at once, switching between them in an instant based on circumstances. A human soldier will slaughter your troops without mercy, then turn around and risk her life to save a wounded enemy child. A human captain will crash his burning ship into your fleet to protect strangers he has never met. A human doctor will travel across the galaxy to heal people who killed her brother. There is no logic to this. There is no pattern we can predict. Humans make their choices in the moment, driven by emotions and values that we do not fully understand, and that makes them more dangerous than any enemy they have ever faced. Because you cannot predict what a human will do. You cannot know if they will fight or surrender, kill or show mercy. You cannot calculate their responses using the standard models of warfare. Every human is a puzzle, and the pieces of that puzzle can shift and change without warning. I have studied humans for 60 cycles. I have read their histories. I have analyzed their tactics. I have spoken with their leaders and their prisoners, and I still cannot claim to understand them. I still cannot predict what they will do when pushed to their limits. But I can give you some advice, some warnings that may save your lives if you ever face them in battle. Keel held up one finger. First, never underestimate a human, no matter how small or weak they appear. The most dangerous human I ever faced was an aging woman named Laura who commanded a mining outpost. She killed more of my soldiers than any warrior I have ever encountered. He held up a second finger. Second, never corner a human. Never give them a situation where surrender means something worse than death. Because if you do, they will choose to take as many of you with them as possible. They would rather die fighting than live as slaves. A third finger joined the first two. Third, never assume you have won until every human is dead or accounted for. A human who seems defeated is often the most dangerous of all. They are masters of deception, and they will use your confidence against you. Captain let us believe we had the advantage right up until he rammed his ship into my flagship. A fourth finger. Fourth, never forget that humans are capable of mercy as well as violence. If you face them as enemies, they will fight you with everything they have. But if you face them as equals, if you treat them with respect and honor, they may surprise you with their generosity. The peace treaty we signed 3 cycles ago came about because both sides finally learned to see the other as something more than monsters. Keel lowered his hand and took a deep breath. I'm old now. My fighting days are behind me. I will not live to see what the future holds for our two species, but you young officers will shape that future with your choices. You will decide whether we remain at peace with humans or return to the endless bloodshed of war. I pray you choose peace, not because I am weak or afraid, but because I have seen what war with humans truly costs. I have walked through tunnels filled with the bodies of my soldiers. I have watched friends die screaming in the darkness. I have felt the terror of facing an enemy who simply refuses to break. War with humans is not glorious. It is not honorable. It is a nightmare from which there is no awakening. And if you are wise, you will do everything in your power to ensure it never happens again. He turned and began walking toward the exit. Then he stopped and looked back over his shoulder. I have one final thought for you, something I learned from Dr. Grace Palmer, a human who saved millions of lives. Hatred is a choice, and so is mercy. Every day and every moment you choose who you want to be. The universe does not force you to be a monster. It does not require you to answer violence with violence and cruelty with cruelty. You can choose differently. You can be better. Humans taught me that. The very enemies I feared most taught me that there is always another way. He turned away again and walked toward the door. Think about that, young ones. Think about the kind of officers you want to become. And when you face your first human in battle or negotiation or diplomacy, remember what I have told you today. They are not like us. They are wild and unpredictable and capable of things that defy our understanding, but they are also capable of greatness. They are capable of choosing healing over harm and peace over war. Perhaps if we are wise, we can learn to do the same. Keel walked out of the hall without looking back. Behind him, 200 young officers sat in stunned silence, their understanding of warfare forever changed. And somewhere across the galaxy, humans went about their daily lives, laughing, working, loving, fighting, being human in all the beautiful and terrible ways that word contained. They did not know that an old alien commander was telling stories about them. They did not know that their capacity for violence and mercy had become legend among the stars. They were simply living, one day at a time, making the choices that would shape the future of the galaxy. That is what it means to be human, and that is why they are the most extraordinary species the universe has ever known.